do that later in the meeting.
Yeah, we can always just flip that around.
Gotcha.
Give me my keys, please. Off the desk.
Ready, Mr. Ball? Good afternoon. I'd like to start the Finance Committee, the Pittsylvania County Finance Committee regular meeting on Tuesday, September the 20th, 2022 at 2 p.m. Board meeting room at 39 Bank Street, Chatham, Virginia. Ms. McCluster, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Cheshire,
Here.
Mr. Ingram,
Present.
Mr. Dalton,
Here.
and I will also note that we have Mr. Dudley, Mr. Scarce, and Mr. Warren in attendance.
Okay. Are there any agenda revisions? If not, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make that motion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ingram. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chester. All right, approval agenda passes. New business. Item A will be DCC Educational Fund request of Mr. Hare at DCC. Mr. Hare. Welcome, sir. How you doing today?
Welcome. Good to see you all.
Yes, sir.
I've got copies of this presentation if you would like to have a copy where you're not having to look at these screens. Thank you. Thank you all for letting me be here today. I'm Shannon Hare. I serve as a Vice President of Institutional Advancement and Development at Danville Community College and also wear the hat of Executive Director of the DCC Educational Foundation. I had the opportunity, I guess it's been a few weeks ago, to have a conversation with your attorney, Vayton Hunt, about a possibility of working and partnering with the community college regarding, I think, a major need in our community, and that is the shortage of CDL drivers. We continue to see across the Commonwealth and especially our community, both in the city and the county, this need. So Mr. Hunt suggested that I put together a presentation and actually present that today to you for your consideration. So what I thought I would do is just give you a couple of bullets here for your consideration. Statement of need, CDL, one of the largest sectors expressing a need worldwide. There are going to be 2.6 million unfilled CDL positions. Per the American Trucking Association, over 80,000 jobs alone in the United States. And this shortfall will increase by twice. It'll double by the year 2030. Also, there's a conversation about equity and the equitable employment. Less than 8% of today's drivers are female. Less than 7% of the drivers are under the age of 25. Over a third of the drivers are 55 years and older. And the job shortage is obviously impacting our supply chains. For those that may be concerned or interested, I know Mr. Hunt suggested, he said, Shannon, what does the enrollment at Danville Community College look like regarding Pittsylvania County? So just so you all know, 40% of our enrollment comes from Pittsylvania County, the residents here. 40% comes from the city of Danville, and about 20% comes from Halifax County. So obviously today is an opportunity for you all to support this request. And I thought I would talk a little bit about what this request actually looks like. So we have partnered in years past with Southside Community College, And those students are having to drive to the other side of Mecklenburg County to actually seek that training. So that means our community members are leaving our community, going to a different community, and then actually taking those CDL classes. We worked with Patrick and Henry Community College, looking at a partnership, kind of the same mindset of taking those students, those community members, and taking them to Martinsville. And obviously, when you look at a location, you look at a vehicle, you look at the wear and tear on that vehicle, you look at maintenance, insurance, it can be extremely expensive. So I think some of you all have already met Dr. Wallace, our new president. I think he's going to be speaking to you all tonight at the Board of Supervisors meeting. And he was successful in Nebraska with a CDL simulator, which means there was an opportunity that he did not have to purchase a truck, he did not have to provide maintenance, he did not have to worry about the wear and tear of a vehicle, and actually was able to purchase through his local government a facility, a mobile unit that would act as a facility for those students to sit in that mobile unit, to sit in that simulator, and to actually do everything that they needed in that simulator to learn how to drive a truck. So with me today is a L3 Harris product guide. I'm happy to let you all see this. If you want to take a look and just pass it around. It's a unique opportunity for the students to sit in this simulator. There's peripheral vision on both left and right. Everything they do in this simulator emulates exactly what takes place in the truck. There's hydraulics underneath. This equipment can actually be moved and actually be used in different parts of the county. It doesn't have to just sit at Danville Community College. There's also this thought of what this could look like at maybe PCTC at night to help those northern end county members to come down and take this. So it eliminates the idea of being in a truck and being on the road. Everything that the student would need would be right there in that simulator. Classes would still be taught, obviously, at the college or wherever the location would be, but being able to sit in that truck gives them the same amount of hours, the same amount of opportunity as a real truck. Those hours are logged. When those students meet those hours, those students then would go to their local office, whether it's Class A, Class B, to test. We would be recommending that we look at both Class A and Class B. We have heard from you all, we've heard from county members, we've heard from city constituents that both Class A and Class B is a need. So your small trucks, your dump trucks, your trash trucks, your school buses, the larger trucks all can be trained through Class A and Class B. So Mr. Hunt suggested, Shannon, instead of you coming to the county asking for the county to pay for all of this, because we know that there are going to be city students and Halifax students potentially wanting to go through this program, does it make sense to ask for 40% of this overall cost, since 40% of our students are coming from Pittsylvania County? I think is a fair trade. With that said, right now we know that piece of equipment, that simulator, is right at $100,000. So the cost of 40% would be right at $40,000. Obviously, I want to also talk to the city for that dollar for dollar support, and then even look at local industry for that match. I know for a fact that you all Pittsylvania County is losing employees to private industry right here because of how they are paying for those CDL drivers. I know Pittsylvania County needs those CDL drivers, and we want to be at a place at Danville Community College where we can provide and respond to the community's needs regarding workforce. With that said, are there any questions?
Shannon, I had several here.
Yes, sir.
Tell me, what does it take to have a student register, and what does it cost?
So we have multiple avenues for tuition. We have G3, we have Fast Forward, we have scholarships, obviously financial payal. So the goal is, at this point, if at all possible, these students won't have to pay hardly anything out of pocket. Okay. We want to make sure their first third's paid for, potentially that second and final third's paid for. We've got some unique opportunities with helping with the finance side that would not be your responsibility, but it would be ours, but really want to help those students achieve that where they could potentially come at no cost.
Okay. And what if other localities decide they don't want to help? Let's say we do and they don't. What you going to do about that?
So then I'm going to continue to actively fundraise and find the need to answer that need, find the additional revenue that's needed.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Mr. Harris?
It would be simple enough as clarity to answer Mr. Ingram's question that if the Finance Committee so wished, they could send it to the board approving this if they desire, contingent upon the other locality, our partners, doing 40% also as part of the proposal. It's obviously a need. We can't find drivers now. Is that not right?
Yeah, that's a
Monday.
better question for Mr. Slimp, but we are having a devil of a time finding trash truck drivers. I know the schools has school bus problems, and it's certainly a need in our organization to attract qualified drivers.
I'd like to make a statement, and I'm going to make a motion. I think it's a wonderful idea because it would allow so many people the ability to see what it takes and what it feels like to drive a big truck. And I think a lot of people that have never done that would come out of the shell and attend this program to get that experience. And I think it'd make them safer drivers. So having said that, I'd like to make the motion that we send this to the full board, contingent upon other localities funding the remaining amount. So that's my motion.
All right, we've got a recommendation. We need a second to send this to the full board. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chester.
Thank you too, Shannon.
Thank y'all. I do appreciate your
that. Yes,
support.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you for your time.
You need your thing back? I'll keep that.
All right. Approved. Item B, the Honorable Mark Scarce, the Clerk's Office new position funding request. Welcome, Mr. Scarce.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. Please and thank you. So that's short and sweet.
You got to put something in between that.
Currently, I have 9 full-time positions and 1 part-time by the comp board, and I have 1 county-funded position. But I respectfully ask that be considered to fund another position to help in the back with the deed room. All of you have been in the office. You've seen how busy it can be. But help with people coming in. Granted, our case numbers are down when the comp board looks at our funding, but our foot traffic is up. As you well know about the reassessment and things, and people coming in looking for maps and plats and deeds and land that they have, and helping back there in that part of the office is where this position would be, and to back up the ladies in the deed room. Last year, those 2 ladies in the deed room, along with my part-time, recorded over 8,000 documents in that office. And we brought in well over $600,000 that was passed on to the county. This year so far, in fees that's collected, we've already passed on over $526,000 to the county. And then take gun permits, for example, the concealed handgun permits. We've done 1,112 of those, and $35 of that comes to the county. That's $38,920. The position I'm asking for, and just talk to Ms. Vanderhyde, the starting salary would be $36,425. Please and thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Ingham. Go ahead.
I'd like to make the motion that we send this to the full board for complete funding, but I also want to say that from the time I've been on this board, Mr. Scarce has been very gracious in not coming and hounding us for money. But he was somewhat promised this position a couple of years ago. And I think the biggest thing past that commitment, which you ought to keep your word, is that a lot of the money that he's talking about, and I know one year it was close to $80,000, he sent it back to the county. And he's been a very good steward of that. He's pretty much carrying his own weight, which is a good thing to do. And so I'd like to make that motion. And thank you, Mr. Scarce.
Thank you.
Got a motion, recommendation, can I get a second?
I'll second it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chelsea. Any discussion on the matter before we vote?
Thank you for coming.
Yes, sir.
Thank
you,
y'all.
Mr. Scarry.
Thank everybody for the time.
All right, thank you. All right, passes. 3 yeses, 0 no. All right, next item, Horseshoe Road and Robin Court improvements. Mr. Adcock, welcome, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon. The Horseshoe Road and Robin Court water projects were 2 projects that we approved for funding from the ARPA allocation back in 2020. So I wanted to give, these projects have been progressing on the design and bidding side, and I wanted to give a update on that and also to give a brief background for those members that were not present when these projects were developed, and then also to ask for some guidance on how to get the Horseshoe Road project funded.
How you feeling, bro? Feeling all right? Better? Good.
They took me off meetings today.
Good for you.
Yep. They did this on purpose, just to throw you off. Okay, good.
All right. In 2017, the PCSA, the former PCSA, received a petition for water service from residents along the eastern portion of Horseshoe Road due to some individual well supply issues. At that time, no action was taken by the board due to insufficient financial return. In 2020, the request for water service was renewed by the citizens. At the September 21, 2021 Finance Committee meeting, the committee approved utilizing some of the ARPA funding for water projects, which included Horseshoe Road and Robin Court. Based on the original citizen petition, the initial extension only included the eastern side of Horseshoe Road from Hyler Farm Lane, which is where our existing infrastructure ends, around to Ed Hardy Road. Considering this scope, $873,000 of the ARPA funds were allocated to the project to include the engineering design. At that same Finance Committee meeting, it was requested by the board to continue the extension around the entire loop based on citizen requests. At the October 2021 Finance Committee meeting, a proposal from Dewberry was approved for the design of the entire Horseshoe Road loop in the amount of $143,400 plus some partial construction administration in case we decided not to do the entire loop. The design has been completed and bids were received for construction just this past Friday. The bids came in at Classical City Mechanical was $2,045,000. C.W. Cawley & Son was $2,088,000. Steve Martin's Trenching was $2,300,000, and Perlman and Pace was $3 million. That is a brief overview of the entire project. You can see where it starts there at our existing infrastructure and loops around back to 58, which is, from the engineering standpoint, that is very desired because it gives us a dual feed in case we do have a break or have to cut the line in the middle. We can back feed from both sides and not keep the entire street out of water service. Just a brief review of the Robin Court project. In September of 2020, the PCSA entered into a consent order with the Virginia Department of Health for correcting exceedances of radium in that well system. This order was assumed by the county when PCSA was abolished. In September of 2020, the former PCSA was awarded a planning and design grant from the Department of Health Office of Drinking Water to study the Robin Court system and prepare a preliminary engineering report to determine options for correcting this radium exceedances that we were experiencing. The PER was complete in July of 2021 and approved by the Health Department in February of this year. And it concluded that our best option for correcting the system was to connect to the town of Chatham's public water system. Just drilling a new well was not any guarantee that we would get out of this vein that was producing the radium, and connecting to the Chatham system produced a good steady supply of water. The estimated cost of this connection is $965,000. Here's a brief overview tying into the town system there on the left-hand side, and then extending out Mill Creek Road and picking up Robin Court. At the September 21 Finance Committee meeting, the committee approved utilizing some of the county's American Rescue Plan Act funding for Robin Court. $965,000, which was the estimated cost plus engineering, has been allocated from the ARPA funds for the Robin Court project. At the October business meeting, a proposal from Hurt and Profit was approved for the design and bidding assistance of the Robin Court project in the amount of $112,688, and this work is about 90% complete. Staff was recently made aware of some significant funding opportunities through the health department, through their various programs, and in consultation with the VDH staff, we think that Robin Court is a strong candidate for funding through these formats. Our PER is complete, the design is now complete, we're under a consent order, and there's contamination. And that really makes a big deal with the review boards that look at these applications. And some of these funding opportunities have up to 40% principal forgiveness, which is also a big consideration. In summary, bids were received on September the 16th, 2022 for the entire Horseshoe Road Waterline Loop project. The low bid, as previously shown, was $2,045,000 by Classic City Mechanical. The board has indicated a desire to construct the full Horseshoe Road Loop. We have received approximately 60 commitments from Horseshoe Road property owners to pay $2,750 each towards the water extension project for a total amount of $165,000. So our funding options are as follows. Option one, we utilize all of the ARPA water project funds, including what was allocated to Robin Court, to complete the entire Horseshoe Road project. And we apply for a grant or loan funding from VDH for the Robin Court project. The funding plays out like this: $873,000 from the Horseshoe Road initial allocation, $965,000 from the Robin Court allocation, and then the expected citizen contribution of $165,000 gives us just over $2 million. And if you look at the expenses, the construction contract, the Robin Court engineering, which has already been paid out of that allocation, the Horseshoe Road, which has already been paid out of the allocation, and future construction inspection, we're looking at a need of about $2,377,000. So the proposal would be to balance the needed amount from the water and sewer reserves for $375,000, and our current unallocated reserve balance is approximately $1.85 million in that account. Option two would be keep the funding allocations the same and utilize water reserve funding to complete the entire Horseshoe Road Loop. And in this scenario, your original Horseshoe Road ARPA allocation was $873. Your expected citizen contribution is $165 for a total of $1,038,000. And then the same expenses leaves a need of $1,226,000. You see that hits pretty deep into our reserve balance. Option three, do only a portion of the Horseshoe Road project as funding allows. This would only get us halfway around the loop, and then it would isolate approximately half of the citizens who have made a request and positively given us feedback that they will indeed tap on and they will indeed pay the $2,750. So that, in a nutshell, I'm looking for some guidance from the committee on which option we would like to take to fund that project.
Any questions from the members for Mr. Adcock?
Mr. Chairman, I didn't like option three. I think if we're going to do the whole thing. And go back to option one and two. Which one of the two do you think would be best?
In my opinion, I would like option one. I would like to cover all the citizens who have expressed support of the project and have expressed a need for the project. It doesn't hurt the budget too much if we move that allocation over to Horseshoe Road, and we were getting really good feedback from the health department that Robin Court is a candidate. And currently, even though we're under consent order, currently we're in compliance with the health department regulations on our radium exceedances. They kind of go up and go down depending on the amount of rainfall we get and how that affects the water that's in the well. So we're currently in compliance, but they can't just waive the consent order. So we still have to do something. So that gives us a little time on the Robin Court end, so it's not a very immediate need. So based on the timeline that the health department has given us, we will make application for the Robin Court funding in the first quarter of next year. And I've got a meeting with the health department funding people next week to discuss it. But I'm getting really good feedback that we will be almost a shoe-in for some kind of funding on that project.
Which means we could use that for another project, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. That's my request would be to allocate that to the Horseshoe Road project. And then also, as I discussed on the engineering side, having a dual feed is very nice for that area. In case we have to cut the line, we can isolate that portion of the line. We can feed from one side, feed from the other, and just have the folks that are within that gap out of water for hopefully a short period of time.
Any more questions for Mr. Adcock?
Any idea what amount of we might get from the health department if they so choose?
What kind of, how much they would?
An estimate, maybe?
The loan would be for the entire project, and then part of that loan would possibly be a 40% loan forgiveness, as I understand how the programs are. So it would either be a low interest loan, like 2%, 2 to 3%, I think is what they're currently at. Hopefully, we would qualify for loan for some principal forgiveness on that, which would be usually 40% of the principal.
And that's what the meeting you have next week is?
Yep. So I guess I would like to have a recommendation to the full board. Is that what we're looking for, Baden, to reallocate that money? And then if that is approved, I would like to have a recommendation to the full board to award the contract to Classic City Mechanical, which we've got the bids already, so that we can move forward with construction and not have to come back in October.
I'd gladly make that motion.
Okay. Any more questions for Mr. Adcock?
Yeah,
If not, can we entertain a recommendation?
Yes, sir. I recommend we send this to the full board with Mr. Adcock's suggestions on how we manage this project and get on with it.
Would that recommendation come from the Finance Committee also, Vaden, for awarding the contract? Okay.
What happens is it goes to the full board during the work session, and then if they agree, we will place this on the business meeting tonight for action.
Would that need to come under two different motions or recommendations?
I would make it two different
Two?
actions, yes.
Okay. All right, can I get a second on the recommendation from Mr. Ingram?
I'll second.
All right, any discussion on the motion? If not, we're ready to vote. All right, let the record show 3 yes and 0 no.
So the second motion would be to recommend that we award the construction contract to Classic City Mechanical in the amount of $2,045,864 would be the wording on that.
Okay. I'd make that motion.
You make a recommendation, Mr. Ingram?
Yes,
Thank
sir, I
you,
sure do.
Can we get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Chester. Any discussion on the motion? If not, we're ready to vote. Let the record show, 3 yeses, 0 no.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adcock. All right, Ms. Vanderhyde, capital improvement projects and reviews. Welcome.
Hello. So the first thing we're going to talk about is your capital projects. And you should have gotten all of those capital projects in your board packet for the Finance Committee this afternoon. So I didn't do slides because the numbers are so tiny, but we'll go over them as much or as little in detail as you would like. The reason that we're doing this is based on Section 8 of your budget appropriations resolution. And that resolution basically states that appropriations designated for capital projects never end at year end. They roll over until that project is finished. But it is up to the board if we move those funds from one project to another. So just to be in compliance with our resolution, I want you all to see what projects are still on the books and what that looks like every year. So that's why I'm bringing that to you this afternoon. So we're going to go over the projects that are in your Capital Improvements Fund, which is Fund 310. I know we use that quite often for big capital projects pertaining to building and grounds, to fire and rescue, and to our general community type capital projects such as the library renovation, Wayside Park, and things like that. So that's 310. Then we're going to go over capital projects in your Water and Sewer Fund, which is Fund 501. We're also going to go over capital projects for Fund 520, which is your landfill fund. And then finally, I wanted to go over the funds that are in your Economic Development Fund, because all of those funds roll over each and every year. So we'll start with our capital projects budget and how much money is in your Capital Improvements Fund. Currently, the cash available in the Capital Improvements Fund is $9.7 million. We will be getting $648,000 from the general fund to fund new projects that were budgeted during the FY23 budget. So this listing not only includes the carryover from 22, but also the new projects for FY23. So we've got computer capital outlay needs that are included of $80,638.93. Our B&G, which is the big pot of money that we usually use for anything that goes wrong during the year that were unforeseen. Just before I came down here, the air conditioner in the 911 building went out, and it has to be 66 degrees in there, so it's not something you can say, well, what are we going to do? So these funds are typically used for those capital items. Fire and rescue capital budget this year is $967,266.04. Of that amount, there's a remaining balance of that volunteer grant that you all awarded some ARPA funds for. That total is remaining of $205,411.33 that hasn't been distributed yet. Our community industrial development needs are at $7,252,802.04. The majority of that is for broadband. That is where that's going to live. So you'll see that at $6,501,620.80. Parks and Recreation budget is at $346,276.15. And like I said, all of these items are funded either with capital carryover or with new monies that have already been budgeted. So with that, I'm going to stop and see if you have any particular questions about these capital items. Nothing has changed other than rolling the last year money into this year's money.
Any questions for Ms. Vanderhyde?
No,
From
sir.
the members?
All right, well, we'll keep trucking on along. We're going to go next to fund. Let's just go in order of how it is in your board packet. You should have Fund 325. That's your economic development monies. These are monies that you all utilize for these incentives that come up during the year that Matt needs to give a company. It may be job grants. We also run our tobacco commission grants through this particular fund. So right now, the Industrial Development Fund has a total of it's $5,676,601.10 is the total, and that is made up of carryover funds along with the general contribution this year of $671,075. And then the Tobacco Commission funds, that's the last remaining drawdown of the SCS broadband grant. That was $86,357.87. That's a lot of sevens. And then our Virginia Brownfield grant, that's $552,800. So that breaks down into the main core is in the industrial development category. Most of these funds are for grading of both the northern southern multimodal park in Hurt along with the park in Berry Hill. So that is our match for those grants to do that work up there. The others are grants that are either remaining, like Hurt, Klopman Mills, Water Sewer. There's a little bit of residual there, which is like $5,807 that could actually be used for water and sewer that we've got going on up at the Hurt Park. We just haven't utilized those funds. The VBSRP grant had some residual of $6,400. And then the Southern Virginia Multimodal Park has $150,000, and that's carryover money. And then you can see that Broadband Initiative grant was $86,357.87. And then the Brownsfield grant, that was one that just started. That's a $600,000 grant, and it's all grant funds. We have a remaining balance at $552,800. So that's your industrial development fund right now. And I will say that if all of our incentives were to come through today, this would not cover it. The money that's here would not cover the incentives that have been obligated. But those obligations come at various points. You know, companies have to meet their expectations and their goals and how many jobs they've created. So that's when you have to make those payouts. We also, through here, we do those tax rebates. We share taxes with the city of Danville. And so we have to budget for the companies that are located in Pittsylvania County but are jointly located by the city and the county. We share those revenues with them, and then we likewise receive revenue from the city of Danville for the cyber park and those buildings that are located there. So with that, I'll entertain any questions on your economic development fund.
Karen, let me ask you, you said if everything came due, we wouldn't have enough money to cover this. How short would we be?
It's probably over $1 million right now.
Okay, thank you.
So, you know, if you get to that point and you need money, you would just have to go to unassigned fund balance if we got to that point. But right now, that's where we stand. The 4.3, like I said, it's about close to $3 million of that and just 2 grants that we have for grading. And so you don't have a lot left over for incentive type funding.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Any more questions for Ms. Vanderheim?
The next fund is your 501 fund, and that is the Water and Sewer Fund. Just to give you a little history, when we inherited Pittsylvania County Service Authority, they had a checking account balance at Carter Bank and Trust of $1 million, and they had monies that were invested at a tune of about $2.5 million. When they came, we took all of their money and we invested it in an account at American National Bank. That total, it should be this paper here that shows all of your balances that are in the capital reserves. That's what we consider capital reserve. So when they came to us, they started with nothing in their checkbook. So whatever they earned as far as revenues is the money they used for operations. So since that time, we've just kind of been clicking along, and we've really never taken the real actual funds from capital reserves needed to cover capital projects that we were funding for water and sewer. So I had that list created for you all so that you would know what that is. There was a pump station generator that was budgeted at $50,000. Chris just told me a while ago, that's probably not going to be something that he does, so that would just be money that would still be in capital. Badger meter system, we spent $211,096.36. We are upgrading our software in Keystone to the platform where we can start billing for water and sewer, and that citizens can go through KeyNet and make payments through that portal, as opposed to using the system that was brought over with PCSA came to us. That total is $60,937. It'll probably be operational in '24, FY '24. Our water and sewer master plan was $119,170.35. The Hertz sanitary sewer pump station, $604,507.96. Water meter reading endpoints were $94,500. The water tank rebranding was $30,663. And recently we were awarded an EDA grant. It has a local match of $600,000. So the reserves that we've obligated so far, but they've never actually come out of that account, were $1,778,74.67. So then the reserves that are remaining are $1.7 million. That's in that account. So I wanted you all to be aware of that as we move forward with the capital. And the next sheet should show you what we have, and it's basically all those things that I talked about that are remaining, such as the software. We've got a little bit that we still have to spend out on the tank rebranding. So our water operations are at $36,143.53, sewer operations at $9,280.13, and then our water capital outlay is at $2,305,383.50. Sewer capital is at $2,927,814,500. These do include those that EDA grant. That will require a public hearing for you all to actually add that to the county's budget because it exceeds the 1% threshold. That's a requirement of the State Code of Virginia for us to advertise for a public hearing. So our grand total for all those capital projects are $5,278,621.66. Do you have any questions on water and sewer?
Any questions?
I have one. Go ahead for the committee members first.
Do you
Mr.
have
Ingram,
any-
got a question? No, sir. No, go ahead, Mr. Moore.
I want to go back to economic development because I think it's important. I understand it, but I think it's important for the citizens that are listening and anybody else that doesn't really grasp what you were saying about not being able to meet the liabilities. The likelihood of that occurring are very slim because every person that is currently on this active board has always worked to incentivize companies only to the extent of what their tax abatements would be. Anything that would take us into that category where you said $1 million was actually done under the leadership of other boards that we were committed to that we all inherited because of bad policy and bad management. So I don't think I know you gave exactly the right number and the right answers. However, the likelihood of that occurring is very
Slim.
very slim, very slim. So, I just want to put our citizens at ease that it's not, we're not nearing the point where we got a devastated $1 million bill.
Right, and I will make the comment, we do not pay out any incentives until the companies meet expectations, and that is in their local performance agreement. We follow that to the T. We're supposed to get reports. The Tobacco Commission requires a lot of that information before $1 even goes to these companies, and we are very well protected legally. if the company does leave, we're supposed to be able to recoup any monies that we have expended.
But that was not always the policy. That policy has been instituted in the last 5 years. Before, we did offer incentives, prior boards that were paid in an upfront basis are not governed by those requirements.
Right. Any other questions or comments on anything we've done so far? We only have one more. Y'all hanging in there.
All right.
A lot of numbers. The last fund is your landfill fund, and that's broken into a solid waste portion, a landfill portion, and then we have one for your bonds. We still are drawing down on those bonds, and we will go through those. Right now, the amount is $6,220,085.84 is the grand total. And that includes $1,607,519.95 in solid waste capital outlay, and that is like for your roll-off trucks and landfill equipment and things such as that. And then our landfill capital outlay is $1,491,000. That's for closure, and we do have some reserve amounts in there. It's supposed to help us offset future capital needs. And this year, as you well know, we did budget some monies for our scale, and our scale died. So we're right now trying to put in a new scale, which will take about a year. So thank goodness we had the foresight to put some of that money in there. But our reserve is for, these large ticket items that do break and we don't have funds. They can kind of come out of that reserve. So that's $1,491,283.93 for that total category. And then the last category is the bond funding. Right now we have $3,121,281.96. You can tell new compactor site, that's for the 3 compactor sites. We still have $2.3 million in that category. And of course, that's mostly for Meadow Ridge that they're working on right now. Our compactor site improvements, that's for your existing compactors. That's at $622,893.92. And then landfill construction, that was for anything that was done at the landfill for Sale C that was recently completed. They're working on a road to that particular sale. It's $121,653.61. So I will say that we do have some money left from the 2 compactor sites that were recently completed. We think we're going to have some funding that could possibly roll into your compactor site improvements to beef up that, because I know we've got several needs to make some adjustments and upgrades to existing compactor sites. So with that, I'll entertain questions on the landfill piece of it.
Any questions, Ms. Vanderhyde? Nope. We good?
Okay,
All right.
we want to move
All
on
right,
to the
thank-
next part.
Yes, ma'am. Item E, contingency fund discussion by Ms. Vanderhyde again.
Okay, this one, I just wanted to give you all an overview of that contingency fund that you all had established during the budget process. The total in there was $982,309, and you should have a chart in your packet that is got blue on it. And it gives you the list there. So you can tell there's reassessment. This BGA Bulletproof Vest is a grant, that's a match. The voting equipment was monies we weren't sure that the Kelly Kazee would need for the registrar's office. I have not heard if that is something that will be needed or not. The circuit court clerk position, that's how you will fund Mark Scarce's position. I'm assuming you will take those funds and in tonight's motion move those funds to his budget to cover that position. We also had moved the EMS supplements $15 to $25 a call, $77.5. I was able to find that in carryover funds. So this money in contingency will not be needed. You could use that for other purposes. The volunteer contribution at the time of the budget, that was $121,000. That was in addition to what funded the matrix in FY '22. If you'll remember, back in June, we found out that we really needed about $24,000 in order to fund the matrix, because the matrix is driven by call volume. So, you can't just give them what they got last year. You do have to make adjustments for their call volume. So we did take the $24,000 from an existing line in their budget. So that's why what is in carryover tonight is just 97 as opposed to the whole 121, because you have funded a small piece of that. So $97,000 is in your carryover. So of course, none of that 121 now is needed from this contingency fund. And then Ringgold Rail Trail, that is actually a grant match, so you will have to do that at some point in time, but it will live here until such time as we need to move it to the grants fund. So that's how we came to the $982,309 total. I have moved some of this money for needs that I knew had to happen. The $5,000 county administrator search, that was our match to the grant that we got. Any grant matches usually comes from your contingency fund, whether you have that budgeted particularly or not, that has to come out of there. Your matches have to come from somewhere. So this is the contingency / grant local match. So that came from there, and then reassessment came from there at $500,000. So that has been moved now that we've awarded that contract to Pearson. And the only reason that it got put in contingency is because at the time that we budgeted and passed your budget, we had not let go of our current reassessment, and so we really didn't feel like we could budget for a reassessment if we really didn't need to. So that's why we put it in contingency. So your updated budget balance in contingency / grant local match is $477,309. And then there's some other items down there that you may or may not want to consider at some point in time. There is a body camera grant that you all allowed the sheriff to apply for. We have not received notification one way or the other as to whether that grant has been awarded, but the match for it is $141,000. The motion that you all made during that time was that the sheriff's office would utilize some of their operational budget. They did have $63,000 budgeted in FY '23 for body cameras. So my thought would be that that would offset the 141 if it's needed. But I can certainly entertain any questions that you might have regarding the contingency fund.
Any questions for Ms. Vanderhyde? From your board members, or any members? Yes, sir, Mr. Warren.
Let's go back to that volunteer contribution of 121. You indicated that you've already, based on the budget, used $25,000 roughly.
Not of this,
No, but
from a different line item
So-
in the already budgeted fire
so
and
to
rescue
get to
budget.
the 121, they would need to be given another 97.
Correct.
Okay? The next question
got
is,
something here.
we're increasing from 15 to 25. So those people that have higher call volumes are going to already be getting $10 more a call. They already get more money because they get reimbursed from all health insurance companies like Anthem. They get Medicare, they get Medicaid. And I'm glad they do. I'm not opposed to any of that. That's why I supported the $15 to $25. We set a matrix for a reason. I am going to be emphatic about my vote to not give them any of the voluntary contribution 80 days into this budget. I will be emphatic that I will stand on the soapbox if we get to March or April and there's a little legitimate need they can show this board that they have a legitimate need any department, I don't care where it's located, to cover that need, but to arbitrarily spread out another $97,000 with no process, no nothing. We don't do that for all the other departments. Why would we do that for this department? You just mentioned you had an emergency where the utilities are going out, opportunities at 911. We know we got another at least $500,000 approximately to pay for the reassessment. We just added an employee, which everybody seems like that's going to work out, but it's not $36,000. It's 36 plus benefits. I agree with the assessment the board just made, the finance committee just made to put the 40,000 toward DCC contingent upon the others reporting. So I agree with some of those decisions, but I will not, if this finance committee moves this forward, be supporting that portion of this. I also have no intentions of, I had a question for you. I was part of talking to the foundation that provided the money. At the time they provided the money, there was no required match. So why is it being stated that there was a required match? We simply are paying
The difference.
It is, it
Now,
was not a
well,
required match
We don't
on
have
this.
to take it from contingency, we can take it from y'all's budget. But it has, that has to come, the difference has to come from somewhere.
I don't care where we
Yeah,
get it
right,
from, Kim,
okay.
it doesn't make any point, but I don't like it when we
And-
come in here and say that it was required match. It was not a required match. We simply approved a contract that was more than the money that was gifted.
Right.
I'm not upset about
And
it, I'm just saying.
that's just terminology that I use if a
But it-
grant doesn't cover the cost.
But
So
it re-
I apologize for
It
not really
reflects
using the
bad
right-
it reflects kind of bad to the
to
community.
the granting agency.
Okay,
Yeah, I understand.
okay. The other items, I'm not going to support the voting equipment at this point because we don't have any information on it.
And this was just to give you an overview. There's no action to take on this. I'm not asking really for any of this money other than just to get confirmation from you all that the 48,934 that's here for the clerk's position, that is where you all, and you didn't really mention funding when you approved it a little bit ago. I assume that's where this would come from, as well as the $40,000, since now you have freed up money that you're not going to pull from contingency.
Well, there's,
Is that correct?
yes, and I'm
Okay.
a little, probably a little more sensitive about the volunteer component because we are having to, and I get it. I don't have necessarily a problem with it, but we're having to, agencies across the county are having to pay subsidies to get folks to run calls. But that's just the way it is now. We all realize that. So I have no problem in supporting those folks if they have a deficiency later on. But I think it's unfair to our tax-paying citizens to take their tax dollars before we know there's a need or not. But I want to be clear to our departments. I appreciate all of our volunteers, but that's why we have a public safety director too, that they can work with and come back and tell us that it's a legitimate need and they can look into that. Whether it be, he's sitting back there now grinning, or whether it be Chris Slimp or whatever. I'm comfortable with all that, but, I think to just arbitrarily, and I can tell you, I've sat on this board for almost 7 years now, and know it to be fact. It doesn't matter how much you give, everybody wants more. If we do this for them, are we going to turn around and now give the sheriff his wish list? Are we going to turn around and give every other department their wish list? Because that's what you're saying. So if you do it for this department, then are we saying they're more important than the sheriff's department? If the sheriff has a need in March or April and it's a legitimate need, I think every man on this board's going to stand up then and give it to him. So, you know, I've heard the rumors out that, well, we were promised this, we were promised this. Well, everybody sends a wish list in when you do budget time. But nobody gets their wish list. Ask the sheriff. Ask Brian Haskins. Ask any other department in the county. I'm sure Scott Budd would like to get a lot more for IT than he's able to get. So, you know, I'm sorry to get on soapbox, but a little passionate about some of this, especially knowing what we're facing in the future with potential expenditures.
So really, the only thing I need you all to just make sure that you know that's going to be included in those recommendations that go to the full board at work session is that the $48,934 go out to the clerk's office, and then the $40,000 that you all agree to contingent on the other localities helping with that simulator. That's the only thing right now that we're even going to do with this money right now. So if you all are okay with that, I'll make sure that's in the recommendation that you all listen to, you know, at the 3:30 meeting. Any other
Any more
questions?
questions from Ms. Van der Heide? Do we need a recommendation for that to the full board?
You don't need any
Committee.
direction on that, so I don't think she does.
Just a consent, because I just know that that's what I need to put on there, and that wasn't in those original motions that were made. What do you think, Baden? Do they need to say that it needs to be added?
Yeah, I would add it just to be clear.
Just a motion to add that
okay.
those fundings would come from here.
Can we entertain a recommendation for the full board on this matter?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
All right, Mr. Ingram, thank you. Any a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chester. We ready to vote? Any more questions? All right. All right, let the record show, motion carries 3 yes, 0 no.
The last item that we're going to talk about is item 5F, and that's the 2023 budget public hearing. That'll happen tonight, and that is because these items exceed the 1% over the budget that you all adopted in April. And so anymore, 1% of our budget, which is roughly $2.8 million, it's very easy to top that these days. So these budget amounts that were advertised, it does not necessarily mean that you will do them. You can pull them off separately if you need to. Totaled $15.8 million. And there is the public hearing notice that did run in the paper that shows the different categories and how much money that was. I can just give you some brief highlights if you'd like. Many people have asked about the chamber's money for $25,000. That is included in this amount. The majority of this amount, roughly $6.2 million, is the school carryover funds. Most of those funds are their ARPA money. So that's why theirs is so very large. So if we had had no other adjustments to this budget but the school's request, you would have had to have had a public hearing to add those items. Some other things that we are carrying over the reassessment monies that were left from last year. That's a large amount at $137,000. The registrar came before you in June and requested that monies be rolled over to make the building, the ECC building, ETC building, more ADA compliant. And so those monies, that was how much was left at year end. we will be rolling those monies over. We can roll those and put it into the capital fund that we just talked about. And that way, you all have control over those funds instead of it going into, you know, a budget, a particular budget. There are other items, I'm just hitting the highlights, not to bore you with anything. The sheriff requested that his comp board vacancy savings, that's a request that usually he makes every year. He was able to receive $309,000 back from the comp board because, of course, you all know the trouble he's having in filling those vacancies. The comp board allows him to utilize that money for other needs such as fuel or office equipment or whatever, and so he drew those monies down just for fuel. So he is asking to reutilize those funds. And the big item here is the public safety that Mr. Warren has touched on at length. I would ask you all to go ahead and maybe pull those items off to vote on separately instead of including them in the total. I think it would be wise to do that because a lot of people are very dependent on much of these carryovers being approved, especially the school board, because that's usually just an item that just happens after our public hearing, and I would hate for them to have to wait on that. So, and of course, I've told you about the $6.2 million school carryover. The library's $100,000 for landscaping is also in this budget amendment. You all said that you all would like that to happen if we had carryover funds. Let's see. And then we've got, you know, all of our salary line items that we had remaining, we are carrying over to the new fiscal year. We did have an increase in our Blue Cross Blue Shield rates, and of course, you all have approved those increases, so that money had to roll over. And some of it is just general rollover that would happen just for the nature of what it is. Like our non-departmental wellness program, that's rolled over now for several years. We haven't spent that money, so it just kind of remains there in case we have a need there. Let's see if it's anything else to speak of. I think I've hit on most everything. We did receive a large check because we had a breakdown at the landfill and we had to turn that in on our insurance. So we received those proceeds. That was $136,000. And
How
then
much
some
was it?
general economic development grants that we received.
How much was that check for?
$136,000. So you can tell when we have big major breakdowns or repairs or it's large, but that was an insurance check. So we did get the money to cover that.
Okay.
So that total is $15,887,689.98. But if you have any other specific questions, I'll be glad to entertain those. I just didn't want to belabor going through each and every one.
Any more questions for Ms. Vanderhyde from any members?
So, Ms. Vanderhyde, you are now requesting that we approve this as presented.
Well, you would approve what you want to approve after the public hearing, but the public hearing is going to happen. I've never had this situation, so I'm just thinking that it might be best if there is items, and I know the one that's very contentious right now is the $97,000 that perhaps we would want to pull that off and deal with that separately, unless you have others. You may have others that I'm just not aware of.
Well, why don't we pull that and talk about it separately, as well as the increase on calls, 15 to 25.
So all of the public safety money, the 77.5 and the 97, y'all want to pull both of those?
I'd be fine with that.
Is that your recommendation, Mr. Ingram?
Yes, sir, it is.
Can we get a second?
I'll second.
All right, got a second?
Mr. Chairman,
Any discussion?
I just have one thing.
Yes, sir.
For me, I'm not going to support the voting equipment, and I'm going to tell my colleagues in advance, I'm fine if we move that to a general item and she comes back to us, but to automatically move it over and rubber stamp it, I'm not in favor of that either. So you may want to throw that in there.
Okay.
I would definitely, the way I've got it in here, I'm putting it in the 310 account. So y'all have complete control over that.
Of the
So
150,000.
they got to come back to this board
Correct.
before we spend a dime.
Correct.
Okay, I'm happy with that.
Okay. Everybody good? We ready to entertain a vote?
Does he need to amend his motion to include that?
Yes, that'd be fine.
Let the record show 3 yes, 0 no.
And we're going to amend that to put that 153 to make sure y'all know that. But it's already in there, set aside,
To
but
put it in the 310 account.
310
Okay.
account.
All right, everybody happy with that? All
And I
right.
think that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Van der Heide. All right, any matters from the committee members?
No, sir.
All right. No matters. Meeting is adjourned.
Our next
Thank
meeting
you.